Well, Mike Reynolds, one of the leading American scholars on FETO, was very clear that the coup was authored by FETO. But the problem we continue to run into is that the public relations abilities of FETO in the West have been extremely difficult for the Turkish government to counter, because the FETO organization has clung to the view that they are a purely educational Islamic organization. And as you know, they run schools in almost 100 countries. They have 200 schools in the United States. And it is only in the last 3 years that we've managed to stop some of the expansion of these schools by outlining in one book, which is almost 800 pages, literally dozens of frauds and crimes committed by the organization in their incredible ability to extract money from, in the United States, from American taxpayers, in Europe and other countries from their own fellow members of CMAT, as well as businesses connected to FETO. But it is a problem that is becoming, I should say it is becoming better understood now in the West post-coup because of the exposure. For instance, in the United States, their H-1B immigration fraud has been widely exposed. Their abuse of teachers and the forced tithing of teachers in the United States has been exposed. In Germany, there's been some serious reports by some of the separate German states concerning FETO's criminal activities. In Africa, more people are becoming aware that organizations related to FETO are engaged in arms trafficking. In the United States, we have an individual who headed up a number of the schools who's now selling munitions in Washington. So this connection between arms and teaching doesn't deceive anyone. And I think that Turkey has to not only argue about the extradition of Gulen, Turkey has to go to the United Nations, to the new subcommittee on counterterrorism, and make a demand on other countries that enjoy close and alliance-type relationships with Turkey to move against FETO, declare them properly to be a terrorist organization, and explain to Turkey why steps have not been taken to remove these actors and to deny them legitimacy. Because the Gulen game is all about attempting, whether it's through the Rumi Foundation in Washington or the Dialogue Foundation in London, is by attempting to gain legitimacy. And now that they are, dubbed by many a community in transnational political exile, now it is very important for Turkey to get clear to all of these countries that this is not a recognized political opposition group that would qualify for asylum protection, but rather it is a terrorist para-political organization. And a para-political organization means that it is an organization not engaged in any way in actual politics, but engaged in secret, covert operations that are hidden from view and that involve acts of violence. And not only, it needs to be pointed out that many in the West are still unable to understand the depths of the sacrifice of the Turkish people 4 years ago that we honor tonight. There are still many who do not understand how close Turkey came to a true catastrophe. And part of it is because, as well, the Gulenists follow, if you will, the Russian Gerasimov theory, making these attacks with false flags, with false uniforms, in a way that gives them what the Americans call plausible deniability. And that's why we engage in book writing, and that's why we've engaged in attempting to document these activities, because we have many in the West who stand beside Turkey in many ways, but appear unwilling to work with Turkey to root out the FETO phenomenon. So I think it is important, and I applaud the ambassador's comments. I think it is very important for us to make this move in the United Nations and to attempt, from the standpoint of international law, to make demands on our allies in Europe and in the United States to provide Turkey with what actions they have taken. And I would say to you as well, it is very important. We know that Gulen worked with the CIA to plant agents in Central Asia in the early 90s. We need to fully understand the relationship that did exist in the past between Gulen and secret organizations inside the United States. This is no conspiracy theory. These are facts of which we are aware. And the activities in the United States that we are exposing in Book 2 of Empire of Deceit involve very serious violations of American election law and practice. The Gulenists have been involved in a very sophisticated effort to buy votes and control politicians through front organizations that exist throughout the United States. And when we say these are parapolitics, what we mean is that through these front organizations and through these political donations, they manage to actually influence American state, federal, and local officials, as well as European officials. And the nature and substance of their donations and their domestic political activity in all of these friendly allied states needs to be analyzed as well. It is for Turkey to make these demands, which is their right under international law. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amsterdam. From your presentation, I understand there are a lot to be done in fighting against such a terrorist organization, but it seems that diplomatic efforts plays a huge role in fighting this organization, maybe starting with the UN and recognizing this organization as helping to recognize this organization as a terrorist organization, maybe going to help a lot to the Turkish case. Thank you for that valuable presentation. I'm now going to turn to Professor Yayla, and I'm going to ask him some specific questions about Turkish politics. And after 4 years, we talked about a lot how this organization emerged, how they decided to operate in such a disaster event, such a catastrophic event, how they dared to capture the Turkish state. But I believe that in recent times we need to talk more about the effects of this coup attempt. We have in Turkey a history of coups. We also believe that these coups had their own effects on Turkish politics. How do you think that this coup attempt, and it was also prevented by the help of Turkish people who decided to protect their own national will. How do you think that this affected Turkish politics? How do you think that this affected maybe civil-military relations in Turkey? How this affected Turkish democratization process? Because after the coup attempt, we had a lot of criticisms towards Turkey, that because of this coup attempt, Turkey had some freedoms removed, cancelled. But from the other side, we also believe that democratization is a long process in Turkey, and we see that Turkish people really cares about their democratic rights. And they also clearly showed in the 15th of July coup attempt, Turkish people really cares about their national will. Based on these assumptions, how do you think that this coup attempt affected Turkish democracy? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hasan. In order to have or to reach to a proper understanding of what happened 4 years ago in Turkey on the 15th of July 2016, we need to look at three things, I think. The first thing to look at is what happened, what was the event. The event on which we are still talking, debating, discussing, and making exchange of ideas. The second thing to look at is the nature of the actor who tried to commit the event. And the third thing is the results of the event for both the actor trying to commit it on the one side and the Turkish state and the Turkish people on the other side. Nobody can doubt that on the night of 15 July 2016, we, all Turkish citizens, witnessed a military coup attempt. The different units of the army were quite active in the attempt all over Turkey, especially in Istanbul and Ankara. Besides, a team was sent to Marmaris, where the President Erdogan was on holiday, altogether with his family. However, the coup attempt failed. There are several reasons for its failure, but let me mention two. First of all, Erdogan rejected the attempt and resisted against it. The second, the people supported Erdogan's stance and resisted against military coup attempt. But before this, there was some other events in Turkey, like 7 February 2012 attempt to arrest the Prime Minister, Mr. Erdogan, on the accusation of cooperating and negotiating with the terrorists. Then came Gezi revolts, in which today we all very well know that villainists played important roles. Gezi revolts was followed by another attempt within almost 6 months. This time a joint effort by the men of Gülen in judiciary and police. What I mean is 17-25 December 2013 events. In other words, there was a fight between two groups in the country. On the one side, the democratically elected government run by Erdogan, and on the other side, an unelected secret group. This group has named itself and was named by some outsiders as the Gülen Cemaati, or the Gülenists, and by itself as Hizmet movement. Now we can turn to the second point in our speech, namely the nature and characteristics of the actor who is responsible for the failed coup attempt and other previous atrocities I briefly mentioned. The service movement, as they call themselves, or FETA, as the Turkish state and in general the Turkish people call them, started almost half a century ago. People in the street who had a chance to get into touch with them thought them as a religious conservative group whose main aim was to raise up religious students to become public bureaucrats. In the beginning, this aim seemed quite reasonable and legitimate, as religious people were consciously excluded from certain positions within the state. There were some other religious groups trying to do the same. However, the Gülenists proved the most successful in doing so and became the leading power in the life of education. As the group gained strength, it seems that it changed its attitude, and started to demand political authority without having a political party running and winning in elections. In this understanding and approach, it was no doubt influenced by the current political regime in Turkey. Let me mention at this point the main nature of the regime that lasted until very last years. In Turkey, with 1961 and 1982 constitutions, a political system was established in which political power of the state was separated into two parts. The first part belonged to the bureaucrats, namely soldiers, and this part included education, foreign affairs, the production and reproduction of official ideology of the country. The second and seemingly unimportant part of the political authority belonged to the elected politicians. This part included the administration of economy, the construction of some infrastructure like dams, roads, bridges, and management of day-to-day affairs. Obviously, Fethullah Gülen and his close friends realized that the essence of the system. They had no real intention to change it. What they wanted to do was to replace the bureaucratic elite and to renew and strengthen the bureaucratic tutelage system. Since, as I indicated before, the religious, the conservative newcomers were carefully and regularly excluded from the bureaucratic circles, they acted in secret. They invested heavily in education, a field that is secretive in the eyes of many people in Turkey, and also very legitimate and necessary for an underdeveloped country. However, the Gülen group has not stayed as a religious group, investing mainly in educational system. In time, it turned into something that is difficult both to detect and to express. A group of people seeming to seek political authority without using open and legitimate political channels in a democracy. And as it gets bigger, it became a very useful apparat for espionage services of other countries. When AK Party came into power in 2002 elections, it acted as a coalition of all excluded groups. This created a new opportunity for FETA. It worked in two ways, from above and from below. From above, AK Party governments were trying to have state cadres to open to religiously conservative people, and the Gülenists had a share in it. From below, FETA has its own channels and ways to have his men climb up the ladders of bureaucracy. In this way, by 2010s, it became so powerful that it started to see itself on a par with elected government. Thus started first a tension and then broke a fight between democratically elected government and FETA. In good ordinary days, and in such a case, FETA would stop back and try to seem FETA would step back and try to seem stepping back. But things have changed. FETÖ had international allies who pushed it forward. The Erdogan government seemed very determined to fight back. The only way for the Gülenists was to assault the government. July 15 event appeared under these conditions, and its main aim was to overthrow democratically elected and legitimate government and to set up a political regime in Turkey which would be secular in appearance but run in fact by Gülen and his men. This brings us to the third point in our presentation, the results of the July 15, 2016 event. For FETÖ on the one side and for the Turkish state and the Turkish people on the other side. Let me proceed by counting the results one by one. First of all, the coup attempt failed due to the brave attitude of the Turkish people. Despite the fact that there had been different factors and actors who contributed to this failure, the main factor is that the Turkish people rejected it and resisted against it. This is of utmost importance, in my opinion, and has several results. The most important of which is the reality that the Turkish people now has a saga to support the demand to democracy. This achievement can be called as a sort of revolution, as I indicated in another article of mine. Secondly, the Turkish democracy gained strength. This country has been known as a country of military interventions, from soldiers' threats to the elected politicians to open military interventions to governments. Now, after the failure of July 15 coup attempt, Turkey has a better democracy with respect to relations between elected politicians and appointed bureaucrats. Third, thus the Turkish bureaucratic tutorage system was dismantled to a certain extent. Today, as we are witnessing in many fields, elected politicians have the upper hand. For example, they determine the foreign policy of the country and they are able to order military officers what to do. Fourth, FETÖ is now considered as a terrorist organization in Turkey and abroad. It has lost within Turkey all its legitimacy and also more of its bureaucratic cadres and civilian extensions. Fifth, despite the fact that FETÖ's nerve system has been destroyed to a certain degree, it is still alive. Its headquarters is based in the USA. It has arms and extensions in certain countries. To put it short, FETÖ is still alive and largely protected in the Western countries. That means that Turkey will go on to struggle with FETÖ in the future. And sixth, the majority of the Western countries failed in understanding what happened and who is responsible for it. FETÖ stay based in Pennsylvania. So is Germany, in Europe. In previous military coups, the West used to open its border to the victims. This time things are different. It is hosting those who took part in the failed coup attempt against Turkey. Thus, the West's universal claim to have and defend democracy failed. Thought together with other events like what happened in Egypt, like the military coup in Egypt, the West has lost its position to be defender and promoter of democracy. It seems to me that total disappearance of FETÖ will take time, and Turkey will have to struggle with FETÖ in coming years. This is all I want to say. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Professor Yayla. It was a great pleasure to have your presentation, your explanation for how FETÖ leaked to the state organization in Turkey and how Turkey is right now dealing with this threat and how it affected Turkish politics right now in Turkey. It seems that despite this was a very very drastic event in Turkish history, we can see some good sides. It seems that it created a mentality in the people's mind that we can protect our elected governments against any kinds of these kinds of coup attempts. So it became an experience for Turkish people. Probably I'm gonna relate your presentation to one of our next speakers. Mr. Alabarda is with us, and his expertise is mainly on military affairs, civil-military relations. So it's gonna be a good idea to ask him some questions about how this coup attempt was organized, and how do you think that the general tradition of civil-military relations in Turkey contributed to this coup attempt, and how do you think any possibility of later attempts, if there is any in the future, any coup attempt in Turkey, how those coup attempters will view this last experience? Do you think that after some reformations, after 15th of July, do you still think that there is any possibility of having such a kind of organization, such a kind of coup attempt anymore in Turkey? Because just before 1 month before this coup attempt, if you ask me a question, do you think is there any possibility of a coup in Turkey? I would say no, of course not, because Turkey is not anymore a third world country. It has a good democratic government, elections, and it's not anymore 60s or 80s, I would say. But after this coup attempt, we are much more skeptical about these kinds of questions. From your military expertise, can you please give us some thoughts? How do you think for the future of Turkey, this civil-military relations will turn in Turkey? Thanks for joining us. The scene is yours.
Okay, Mr. Hasan Basri, thank you very much. And also, I would like to salute the other guest who is participating to us, and also all people who is watching now us. Very nice question, though, how the civil-military relation affected such kind of coups in Turkey. When you take a look at to the history of Turkey, it is full of with military interventions and military coup d'etats, starting from 1960s, 71, 1980, and 1997. And also, we know it is very famous, the 15th of July. So it is not a surprise that 15th of July is a coup, because there are still many manipulations which is being done by the FETÖ that this is not a coup, this is something that is organized by the government, but that is a very stupid manipulation, because Mr. Hasan Basri, as I said, that Turkish political history is full of military interventions and coups. So that coup and that military intervention which has been occurred on the 15th of July was not something very unfamiliar to the Turkish political life. For this reason, how civil-military relations are affecting such kind of military interventions, including the FETÖ failed coup attempt. Okay, when you take a look at to 1960s, till to 1960s or 1950s, before the Turkish political life starts, Mr. Atatürk, as the first president of Turkey, and later the second president, Mr. İnönü, as an ex-soldier, ex-general, was controlling the military inside Turkey by a one-man ruling system. And we know that the charismatic leadership of Mr. Atatürk was giving him a lot of power in order to control the armed forces. So during their terms, we didn't see any military intervention during their terms. But after 1950s, when Mr. Menderes Democrat Party came to the power, after 10 years, we have seen that generals and a junta, which is inside the Turkish military, attempted a coup inside Turkey and inside the Turkish political life. After that, there didn't happen any civil-military relation in terms of democratical norms. In 1960, in 1971, in 1980, no political party was able to control what's going on inside the military, what is going on inside the security structures, including other security structures than the Turkish Armed Forces. For this reason, it was not very hard to conduct a military intervention, and to talk against all politicians was very familiar inside the Turkish political daily life. And we know that in 1997, not too far away, that all generals, even major generals, brigadier generals, I mean lower ranked generals, was talking against the political leaders however they wish for. For this reason, we cannot talk about any issue in name of democratical control of armed forces and a real civil-military relations in terms of the academical structures which is drawn by in the United States, in France, in many parts of the NATO countries also. For the first time in its history, during the rule of the Justice and Development Party, they tried to do something in order to make it ineffective. But I can say that even the attempts that the Justice and Development Party did till to the 15th of July was not enough, because you said that if you ask me, will there be a military intervention and coup inside Turkey before 1 month of the 15th of July, you say that I would say no, because you say that you clearly underline that Turkey has a functioning democracy. So a military intervention in 2016 is such kind of unacceptable act. But let me tell you that military interventions are not on the scene because of lack of democracy. It is because lack of military democratical control of military activities in any country. When you take a look at, for example, at the NATO countries, such as United States, such as United Kingdom, France, they do control without any interruption their armed forces. And it is a huge question since from maybe 2000 years from the time of the UNL, as a Roman poet says that who guards the guardians? So it's a huge question. During the Ottoman time, Sultan was strictly controlling his armed forces, and no one was trying to change Sultan and trying to bring someone else. But in the democratical life of the Turkey, the democratical control of the armed forces was almost nothing. No one was controlling the armed forces. Let me tell you with one example, which is very important. I participated to the Turkish Armed Forces as a student, as a military cadet in 1984. I didn't hear any word in Turkish, of course, with the civilian supremacy. No one educated us. No one taught us that civilian supremacy is one of the most important issues in the civil-military relations. And after I graduated from the Turkish War Academy, it's very strange that till to my career, 15 years, I was a major, and I was in the United States, in the California State University and Monterey Naval Postgraduate School. For the first time in my life, it's a shame that I heard civilian supremacy and civil-military relations. So when I try to understand what's going on in democracies, what is the meaning of civil-military relations, what is the meaning of democratical control of the armed forces, I understood that there is a huge library which is written about that issue, and including the United States, including France, including England, all countries are trying to monitor what is going on inside their armed forces. For this reason, no one understood that FETÖ infiltrated also to the armed forces, and they were able to make a coup inside the Turkish armed forces. For this reason, civil-military relations and lack of civil-military relations and lack of democratical control of armed forces was the most important parameters that we should talk about why military interventions are iterating in every 10 years inside Turkey. Sometimes it has different forms, not only FETÖ in 1960s. It was not FETÖ who made a military coup. It was another junta, and he was underlining the reason of the military coup is because of Kemalist values are forgotten during the Democratic Party rules in between 1950s and in between 1960s. So when you take a look at to the 1971, in 1980, it was all the same. It was being really remarked by the armed forces leaders, generals, that the governments are not taking care the Kemalist values, so they are unfortunately forced to make a military intervention inside Turkey. For this reason, let's be honest that if we really want to now not iterate such kind of military interventions in our future history, we should be very careful about civil-military relations and democratical control of armed forces. This is not something that you did it and you forget it, and from now on, nothing as a military coup is impossible inside Turkey. If United States as a country, which is very famous with its liberal values, has never met with a military intervention in its history, still democratically control its armed forces without any interruption, a Turkey which is full of its history with the military intervention, we cannot stay relaxed. We should really take into considerations that we should take lots of precautions, and we will never hesitate to ask for and to stop our control over the armed forces inside Turkey. For this reason, your question, in the future, will it reiterate again or not? I cannot say yes or no. But what I can say, if we do not monitor what is going on inside military, and if we does not have any defense policy as a politicians, I can say you that the military intervention after 20 years may iterate inside Turkey. But if you put the same structures like the France did, United Kingdom did, United States did, then probably you will not meet again with a military intervention. This is a very important issue. When you take a look at to the Spanish model, for example, Narcis Serra is very important figure about that, because Spain also is famous with its fascist dictatorships and military interventions. The mayor of Barcelona, as a lady, put lots of reforms and prevented military interventions inside Spain. For this reason, without taking into consideration what is the European Union is saying, what the United States is saying, we should put the democratical values to the ground, and we should act according to what these conditions and parameters are dictating us. For example, let me give you one example. Before the 15th of July, the civilian politicians were not able to prevent, for example, a colonel is being promoted to a brigadier general, and a consensus should be taken. And in the council of the military high council, there are 19 members, I can say. Of these 19, only 2 civilians. One of them is the prime minister. The other one is the Department of Defense, the leader of the Department of the Defense. The other 17 is fully 4-star generals. In those circumstances, when they want to promote a colonel to a brigade general, they're raising their hands. So it is unacceptable. The politicians should sit at their tables, and after the military made some preparations, they should bring it, and the civilian leaders should approve whether that colonel will be promoted to a brigade general or not. Okay, after the 15th of July, the Turkish political elites was very successful changing all those rules, and they put to the table many security reforms on the table. Of these security sector reforms, one of the most important issue that all the promotions now only limited with the desire of the political elites. But when you take a look at what kind of discussion has been happened inside the Western media, especially, the Justice and Development Party is creating its own army. It is unacceptable. It is the same in France. It is the same in Italy. It is the same in the United States. The elected civilians are the only sole authority, whether someone will promote or not. But when it comes to Turkey, they say that Justice and Development Party is creating its own army. It's unacceptable. For this reason, we will put on the democratical values in order to control armed forces, and we will apply them. If we do not do that, if we change them, if the democracy is not considered the only game in the home, then it will iterate without any doubt. But what can I say that after the 15th of July, the measures which were taken by the elected government is, I can say that is huge reforms. For example, changing the structure of the armed forces, again, making the Department of Defense as the only authority and chief of staff is under the Department of Defense. Such kind of reforms are very important. But what about the University of Ministry of Defense is also very, very much important steps which is taken in order to control the armed forces, because the curriculum, as I said before, I didn't hear till my 15th year inside the army as a professional, I didn't hear any word in name of democratical control of armed forces. I learned it from Thomas Bruno, Professor Thomas Bruno, which is a scholar inside the United States, and that is a shame. So now, when you take a look at now to the curriculum of the University of National Defense, they are teaching to the new cadets the civilian supremacy, civil-military relations, what is the role of the soldier when you compare it with the elected government is very important. So, for this reason, such kind of educations, in order to change the mentality of the soldiers inside the Turkish Armed Forces, is very important. But when you take a look at, again, to the reports which is written inside the United States, that they say that we should change the curriculum of the University of National Defense, and we should also manipulate it. Why? Because if you raise your cadets, your generals, your officers, in order to be a very loyal democratical officer, democrat general, you should be very careful in terms of the curriculum. So we shouldn't let any other country to change the curriculum in a manipulative way, like in the before times. Because as I said, in the war college, they didn't teach to any officer the democratical values, including the civil-military relations. For this reason, still now, inside Turkish Armed Forces, officers which participated to the Turkish Armed Forces 10 years ago, 20 years ago, mentally didn't change, because they were not raised like this. They were raised in case the circumstances are going to the negative side, you have a right to intervene to the political life. For this reason, we should also change mentally our officers, our generals. How? You should open courses, and in those courses, we should teach them what is the meaning of civil-military relations. Let me give you one example. In the night of the 15th July, a 3-star general who resisted to the FETA and explained himself on a TV channel like this: I checked the order for the military intervention and I couldn't see the signature of chief of staff. For this reason, I understood that it is FETA. So I didn't participate to them. What if that paper was signed by the chief of staff? Will you participate then? For this reason, I can say that still mental reforms didn't occur 100% inside the Turkish Armed Forces elites. For this reason, it is very important. The second, maybe the last issue, is that first time in the Turkish political life, we can see that the Turkish nation didn't let a military intervention. And this is a very important issue. For this reason, we should make it warm, and also we should never let the people who used their guns to kill the civilians on the streets of Istanbul, on the streets of Ankara, we have to witness that they are being judged democratically with their lawyers and with a democratical judgment. After that, we should see that they are not being forgiven, and we should show to all military personnel, if you try to intervene for the next time, your end will be like that, like those guys. For this reason, I know, for example, McChrystal was a 4-star general inside Afghanistan. For criticizing the Obama administration, he was called to the Washington, D.C., and they said, okay, bye-bye, you may leave, because you are criticizing the political life. But the same 4-star general of the Central Command of the United States says that our officers, our allies are being arrested and we cannot do anything. For this reason, we shouldn't hope any help from the administration of Pentagon in order to tell them what is FETÖ, what is the others. For this reason, we should do what it is to be done. Otherwise, if we ask European Union, if we ask United States, we will never be able to get even 1 meter ahead of our vision.
Thank you, Mr. Alabarda. We had 4 very thoughtful discussions of coup attempt in Turkey. And I had, from my perspective, I had a very good chance of having these thoughtful discussions. I will take, there will be a very short question and answer session. I will take 1 question for each speakers, and I will ask to all of you, keep your answers limited to 2 or 3 minutes, please. I will follow the reverse order. I'm gonna start with Mr. Alabarda. I took 1 question for all of you, and actually, Mr. Alabarda, you named some important reforms after coup attempt. But if you need to name just one, the most important one, can you please clarify which reform is the most important and why do you think this is the most important? In 2 or 3 minutes, can you please explain that to us?
Okay, it's perfect question. From my point of perspective, the most important reform is that the promotion High Consul of the military of the Turkish Armed Forces. With those reforms, only the politicals, if they want, someone can promote to a colonel or to a general or a 2-star general, 3-star general. That is a very important control over who is being elected to be promoted to a general. But what is the most important one that we still miss as a reform? If you ask me that question, I would say that the secretary, the civilian government should appoint a civilian secretary to the Minister of Defense, to the Armed Forces, to the Navy, to the Air Force, like in the United States, as a civilian, of course, with a defined rank, something like 2 or 3-star general. He or she should observe what is going on inside the military and report to the elected government daily, weekly, monthly, and monitor what is going inside without any interruption. This is the reform that the Turkish political elites so far didn't do that.
For such clear answers to the question, I will turn to Professor Yayla. I have another question for him. It was asked from one of our viewers. It's about the political branch of FETÖ organization, because you know this is a huge debate in Turkish politics right now. Some political parties, some political party leaders are talking about, okay, there must be some political branch to that FETÖ organization. Do you think that this is a meaningful discussion, or what's your thoughts about this political part of FETÖ?
Thank you very much. This is a very hot issue in Turkey. Political parties are accusing each other of being FETÖ's political food, so to say. I think this is a wrong discussion. To keep discussing about FETÖ's political food is harmful to the fight that Turkey is giving against FETÖ. FETÖ didn't respect politics and didn't want to have political ways to use, because it believed in getting organized within the state. So if we make a comparison between PKK and FETÖ, we can say that PKK is an organization outside the state and assaulting the state from outside, and FETÖ is an organization mainly within the state. FETÖ didn't have an independent political branch, but I'm sure it had extensions in all political parties, especially political parties apart from Necmettin Erbakan's political party. So this debate is meaningless to me, and it's also harmful for Turkey's very important struggle with FETÖ. What we need to do is, or what all politicians and all political parties, legitimate, open, legal political parties need to do is to join the FETÖ, because FETÖ is in the end the enemy of democratic politics, not any political party.
Thank you, Professor Yayla. I'm just proceeding to my questions. The next question is for Mr. Robert Amsterdam. It's about the process, the negotiation process between Turkey and the United States about the FETÖ case. Can you please give us some details about on what stage of this negotiation process, or can you see any further improvements between Turkey and the United States about this FETÖ case?
Well, I believe there is. In respect to the schools, I think there is a growing understanding in the United States that FETÖ has targeted the poorest of the poor, Blacks, Hispanics in many cities. I know that we have liaised with the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. I know that we have actually in the last number of years, and most recently, developed a large number of whistleblowers within the organization in the United States. Whistleblowers that have been willing to talk to federal and state authorities. Just a few weeks ago, we were contacted by 10 teachers who were fired in a school in Texas illegally, and we think in retaliation for their refusal to go along with the frauds of the FETÖ organization in Texas in their school system. So I think there's actual real progress. And again, the progress is granular. It's at the state and local level. The relationship between Washington and Ankara in terms of many other issues, I'll leave that to the people around President Erdogan. But on FETÖ, I think we're making progress locally.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Amsterdam. I will have the last question for His Excellency Hasan Ulusoy. Actually, we talked about all these parts, and based on that question, I will also ask your concluding remarks for this panel. Can you please concretely summarize us what kind of diplomatic efforts are taken by Turkey in fighting against this terrorist organization, and what kind of diplomatic efforts are going to be taken in the coming future? And can you please give us some thought about what kind of leverage Turkey has on this diplomatic efforts shortly, please?
Well, thank you. Well, actually, let me also thank all the panelists. They covered different aspects of the issue, which are already complementary to one to another. So it was a full picture we have given. Well, regarding the diplomatic effort, it's a continuous process. As I said in my the presentation, now in abroad, the FETÖ-affiliated bodies should be pursued, should be closed. These are our aims. We need to explain what FETÖ is for that reason, and we need to also provide what are the crimes they committed. That's why I put emphasis in my speech on the nature of crimes they have committed, and the crimes are of universal value, starting from the crimes of coup, leading to terrorism and all sorts of organized crime. We know now in many countries, FETÖ-related bodies are operating under the guise of legally established bodies, like, let's say, associations or educational activities, as well as civil societies. But inside, through their clandestine structures, they are, for example, money laundering, financing organizations, making all sorts of illegal activities. And one of the recent ones, as we discovered, actually it is already in the press, it was stated that even some international drug, let's say, narco networks were used to finance FETÖ. So it is also now obvious that all these areas are the ones. So we need to do to explain all these issues through various channels. Diplomacy is not the only channel, of course. All related bodies of our state work hard on it through the Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Interior, with their own counterparts in Europe. But also there is one thing, is that we need to also convince the public opinions, because as long as there is a sort of let's say, doubt about in the minds of public opinion, the FETÖ is manipulating this. That's why civil society also quite important mainly in European countries, to explain the real nature of this dark, sinister organization. So this is a fight that we need to carry out together with all related bodies of the society, aiming for the same good end, to get rid of this criminal network from our society and from our future. So it's a long process, but as I said, we are determined and we are making some progress in many countries. So I hope in the near future we will be able to give similar examples in the Western European countries, although this is a bit difficult process, I must confess.
Yeah, of course. We all learned that this is a long and difficult process, but our efforts are always in trying to clearly explain to the world that this is a very dangerous organization, and it can just catch up all different nations. It can be a threat for all nations right now hosting that organization. This was a very good discussion from my own perspective. I would like to thank you all, to our keynote speaker, Mr. Ambassador, and our panelists, Mr. Amsterdam, Professor Yayla, and Mr. Alabarda. I would like to also thank to our audiences for watching us tonight. I also would like to remind you all that this was a very tragic event in our history, but it also turned out to be, from my own perspective, a very special night for Turkish public, which showed to the entire world that Turkish public is supporting its own democracy and its own national will. I hope we will all remember this night 4 years ago. We will keep that memory in our consciousness. So I would like to thank you all again. Thanks for joining us. I hope we will have these kinds of discussions in the coming future. Many thanks. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you all.